In this screencast, I'm going to create a very simple keypad using Inkscape 0.45. First thing I'm going to do is create a key for my keypad. We'll use the rectangle tool to draw a rectangle. We'll hold Control just to get those nice even rounded corners. I'm going to make a duplicate of this rectangle. You can see that the opacity is already set a little bit lower than full opacity, which is fine for now. So we take that second rectangle and we'll change the color of it first. Bring up the fill and stroke dialog box. We'll still leave the opacity down for a minute here. Might make things a bit clearer. I'm going to pick a certain color. Obviously you can pick whatever you want. Once I have that picked and selected, I'm going to duplicate the object using Edit, Duplicate, and selecting that object, holding Control-Shift, I'm going to shrink it down about its center a little bit. Select that middle object and make it a little bit lighter. Something like this. I can select both objects and bring the opacity up. You can see it changes quite a bit here. We'll make that a little bit darker. We don't want such a big change, maybe. Now, I'm going to select that middle object. Again, Edit, Duplicate, bring it over here. I'm going to make it black. And while it's selected, I'm going to use the gradient tool and create a little bit of a highlight down like this. Doesn't have to be exact at first. And select all three. Bring up the Align and Distribute dialog box just to center everything, make sure everything's lined up. Select that topmost gradient and just reduce the opacity a little bit. I don't want such a heavy shading on there. Next, I'm going to hit the Text tool. We'll just use the default text. Get our number on there. Center that the way you want it. I'll just do it by eye here. And now I'll take this first rectangle we used. I'm going to make it a little bit longer or taller and just a touch wider. Bring it back in behind. Something like this. Once it's selected, you can play with that opacity whatever you want. And also, I'm going to put a little bit of blur on it. Like this. So there's our key. Now what I will do is highlight everything and hit Object Group to make it one object so it doesn't fall apart when I grab it and move it around. Next, I'm going to highlight that grouped object And I'm going to want to have 9 keys in this. You can have as many as you want, but let's say it's 9 keys. So once I select that grouped object, I'm going to create 8 more duplicates of it, so we have 9 total. So while it's selected, I'm just going to hit Control D 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can double check by highlighting the whole group of them, and you'll see down at the bottom here 9 objects. Once they're all 9 are selected, you hit Object, Grid Arrange, and it sets up 1 row, 9 columns. Obviously that's not what we want, so we just increase the number of rows, and it will modify the number of columns. And we'll try out the 35 spacing just to see how it works. And hit Apply, and there we go. That's good enough for me. So I will highlight those 9 grouped objects, and I will ungroup them so they go back into their separate objects. And then I'm going to go through and just modify all these keys so they're not all number 1. It's important to, when you create the button, to leave the number as the topmost object just for this stage, because if it's down below you're going to have a hard time selecting them and changing them, and it's going to be a real pain in the butt. So make sure when you create the key that you leave that number symbol as the topmost object. If you're unsure, you can always select it and hit this button that says Raise Selection to Top. So now that they're all corrected, I'm going to highlight them all and group them again so they don't fall apart in their spacing. So that's our basic keypad. Now we can do a couple other things like I did in the demo or the intro. Create a nice rectangle around this first, and bring up the fill and stroke dialog box again. We'll make it fully opaque and some shade of gray. Let's say it's a little bit lighter shade of gray. Send that to the back. We'll select it, duplicate it, and we'll create a bigger object, and we'll make that a little bit darker. And again, we will click that, send it to the back, and if you want at this stage you can grab everything and again do the alignment just to double check. If you want everything centered, you may not. And then as another touch, you might take that rectangle, duplicate it, Control D, I just created a duplicate of it. I will make it black, and I will hit the gradient tool while it's selected and create kind of a shade. Now that's a bit ham-fisted, so what I'll do is a couple things you can do is either reduce the opacity to make it a little more subtle. We'll do kind of that, plus when it's selected and I have the stretching arrows here, I'll just grab them and pull them up a little bit to make it a little more subtle, a little more closer to what we want. And then as I do with everything, I will create another duplicate of that larger rectangle, make it black, blur it, and send it to the back for a drop shadow, because that's what all the pros do, or so I'm told. Alright, close these down. You can group that sucker together so you can use it in any other projects you're working on that have a keypad. That's it. Pretty simple. Hope you find it useful. And that's it. Thanks for watching.